happens when fear overpowers integrity? When people's hearts are so hardened that they can't see the truth that's staring them in the face? In John chapter 19, we witness the ultimate clash of courage and cowardice, devotion and stone hearts. Pilate, a man with the power to stop an innocent man's death, cowers to the demands of the crowd, choosing political expediency over truth. The Jewish leaders, their hearts so hardened by pride, refused to recognize the very Messiah that they'd been waiting for. But in the shadows of this darkness, we also see profound devotion. The women who stood by Jesus at the cross, unwavering in their love and loyalty, and John, the disciple who remained when others fled, show us what true strength and faith look like. And then there's Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, two men who had kept their faith quiet, but now, at great potential cost, step boldly into the light, honoring Jesus in his death. In today's video, we are diving deep into the powerful contrast of fear and courage, hard hearts, and unwavering devotion. I'll share why these moments speak to the core of our faith and what we can learn from those who choose love and truth even when the cost was high. Welcome to Wellness in the Word, the place where we come together to thrive together by talking about how the Bible holds the keys to wellness in all aspects of life. If we're meeting for the first time, my name is Jill, and I'm so glad that you're here. This is a space where we come together to see the relevance of the Bible. It's more than an ancient book. It's a life-changing, soul-strengthening guide that holds the keys to every challenge that we can face in this life. Whether you're just beginning your faith journey or looking to deepen your walk with God, you'll find resources, encouragement, and community to help you thrive here at Wellness in the Word. So grab your Bible and a cup of coffee perhaps, and settle in and let's explore God's truth together and discover how it can bring hope, purpose, and true wellness to our lives. There's so much we could pick apart in this chapter. We could literally spend weeks mining the gold here in chapter 19 alone, but we're going to limit our study to focus on a couple of contrasts that we find in this chapter. But I do want to encourage you to read this chapter and pore over every word of it, especially through the lens of what Jesus endured for you and me. At the end of John chapter 18, Pilate is caught in a tense back and forth with the Jewish leaders, questioning Jesus about his identity and the charges against him. Pilate declared, "I find no guilt in him," John 18:38. But still, the pressure from the crowd and the leaders mounts. As we move into John chapter 19, this tension just escalates. Pilate has Jesus flogged, an act to appease this angry crowd. Guy N. Woods, in his commentary on John, said that he would allow the bitter mockery to be directed at his prisoner and order him to be scourged, evidences how devoid of shame and how little regard Pilate had for the basic principles of justice and right. After the brutal beating, the soldiers mock Jesus and they dress him in a purple robe, a color symbolizing royalty. They place a crown of thorns on his head. They taunt him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and they strike him. Look at verse 4 with me. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him." Underline, "See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know I find no guilt in him." This is the second time that Pilate has declared he has found no guilt in Jesus. In your margin, write second time and write CF 1838, which is the first time Pilate made this declaration. Now look at verse 5 with me. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." Circle this phrase, "Behold the man." File that phrase away because we're going to come back to it later. The Jews begin to cry out, "Crucify, crucify." I highlighted that detail with my color for sin. But look what Pilate says in verse 5. "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." Underline that. And next to the phrase, "I find no guilt in him," draw a line to your margin and write 3 times. Pilate, despite knowing the truth, fails to act with courage. And in his attempt to pass the buck, as we might say, and clean his hands, he said, "Take him yourselves." With these words, injustice takes center stage. This is the bridge that leads us into the heartbreaking events that will follow in John chapter 19, where the choice between truth and fear, justice and compromise, will ultimately determine Jesus' fate. Look at verse 7. The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die because, circle it, he has made himself the Son of God." They accuse him of blasphemy, Leviticus 24 verse 16, because he said that he was the Son of God. This is the charge that they brought against him. Look at verse 8. When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. Underline that. And next to the word afraid, write CF Matthew chapter 27 verse 19. And then turn there with me and let's look at this very interesting verse together. "Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, 'Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream.'" Think about where we are at this point. Pilate has declared Jesus' innocence 3 times. He observes that the crowd's fury is reaching a boiling point. He sees through them and he knows their real motives. And then his wife says, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man." And he becomes even more afraid. And then he goes back to Jesus and he asks, "Where are you from?" But Jesus doesn't answer. Read verses 10 and 11 with me. "So Pilate said to him, 'You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?' Jesus answered him, 'You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin.'" Underline, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above." Pilate spoke of his power over Jesus, but Jesus tells him the power he had over him was from the Father. His power as a Roman official had been granted to him by God. Jesus is stating that ultimately, even Pilate's role in this trial and his crucifixion is under God's control. And then Jesus also said that those who delivered him over to Pilate had greater sin. Well, who delivered Jesus over? First and foremost, Judas, who betrayed him. But the list doesn't stop there. It also extends to the Jewish religious leaders who conspired to have Jesus arrested, tried, and handed over to Pilate for execution. These religious leaders, who should have recognized Jesus as the Messiah, are rejecting God's plan of salvation and choosing to reject truth. Their sin is a sin of betrayal against God's purposes, making it even more grievous than Pilate's involvement. Does that mean that Pilate bears no responsibility for his own actions in condemning Jesus? No way. But Jesus is making a distinction. The religious leaders who had plotted against him and handed him over to Pilate are committing a greater sin because they are acting out of malice and deceit. They had an awareness of the scriptures, a greater knowledge than Pilate, who was just a Roman ruler who would have limited knowledge of the scriptures. Listen to what Wayne Jackson said to explain this. Pilate was guilty of setting aside legal justice. But Caiaphas and his cronies, who should have known the scriptures and recognized their Messiah, had the greater guilt and ultimately would be judged more severely. Look at verse 12 with me. From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." Underline, from then on, Pilate sought to release him. And then circle the word sought and draw a line to your margin and write, continued to make efforts. He tried over and over to get them to cease their efforts to put to death an innocent man, but they would not listen. And then the Jews pull out the big guns, as we might say. They see that Pilate is struggling with what he knows to be true, that Jesus is innocent. And then they decide to intensify the pressure, using his political position to their advantage. Jackson said, Pilate, like a reed blowing in the wind, attempted again to release Jesus, but the Jews were in psychological control. They attacked the governor's Achilles' heel, charging, "If you release him, you are no friend of Caesar's. This man claims to be a king, thus a rival of Caesar's." Pilate had already discussed the king issue with Jesus, and he knew the Lord was no political threat, but every drop of courage evaporated from his soul. Christ thus was brought out to the platform where judgment was to be pronounced formally. Look at verse 14. Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He, Pilate, said to the Jews, "Behold your king." Circle the phrase, "Behold your king." Next to this phrase, write CF verse 5, where Pilate said, "Behold the man." Now he calls him king. This was Pilate's indirect way of expressing his unhappiness with the Jews. But he would not go through this without letting it be known that he was not happy. It was his way of shaming them for what he knew in his heart was injustice. This change in description from "behold the man" to "behold your king" did not go unnoticed by the Jews. Their hatred for Jesus and displeasure in Pilate's scorn had them crying out, "Away with him! Crucify him!" And then in verse 15, Pilate continues this verbal tit for tat and said, "Shall I crucify your king?" Circle the phrase, "your king." The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Underline that. The very suggestion that Jesus was their king was the king of all insults. They despised that thought. And then they delivered him over to be crucified. I have highlighted this in my color for sin. In John chapter 19, verses 17 through 21, Jesus carries his cross to Golgotha, the place of the skull. He is crucified along with 2 others, and then Pilate made a sign reading, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Notice in verse 20 that it was actually written in 3 different languages. And the purpose was that anyone who passed by, whatever their language, would be able to read it. The chief priests object, and they ask Pilate to change it to say that Jesus claimed to be the King of the Jews. They knew that this was a dig from Pilate, a way for him to express the disdain that he had for the way that they had pinned him in. It was a complete insult to them, but Pilate refuses, saying, "What I have written, I have written." Listen to what Woods said. There is a discernible streak of stubbornness in the heathen governor's attitude. At their instigation, he had condemned Jesus to death on the ground that he professed to be the King of the Jews. Well, so it would be. He was in no mood to appease them further. Hey girls, just a quick interruption to tell you about a couple of my favorite makeup products, Crunchy Foundation and Concealer. This foundation gives me a smooth, flawless, lasting coverage, and the best part of all is that it feels like I'm not wearing any makeup at all. The concealer provides the perfect extra touch to hide those dark circles and brighten up your eyes. Crunchy is a revolutionary makeup brand that is redefining beauty by blending high-performance cosmetics with a commitment to clean, toxin-free ingredients. The company is dedicated to providing safer alternatives and ensuring that their products, from foundation to lip gloss, are free of harmful chemicals commonly found in conventional makeup. If you're looking to switch up your beauty routine and try something that's not only great for your skin, but also toxin-free, I highly recommend Crunchy products. I have been so happy with all of the products that I have tried, and I know that you will love this foundation and concealer. Be sure to check out the link in the description for 10% off of your first order. Now, let's get back to our study. So they take Jesus and they put him on the cross. The soldiers divided his garments, which was a prophecy fulfilled. Write CF Psalm 22 verse 18 next to verse 24. That entire chapter would be a good chapter to read this week as a supplement to this chapter. And then look at verse 25. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Underline this verse. I have often thought about Mary and what a strong woman she had to be. And don't you know that she was no stranger to scorn? She was with child before she was married. You and I know this was not because she and Joseph had put shoes first, pants last. They didn't do things out of order. The baby in Mary's womb was of God, not Joseph. But don't you know they were the talk of the town? And how many would believe that Jesus was the Son of God, even if they told them that? Not many. Elizabeth, however, was filled with the Holy Spirit and exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And why is this granted to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me?" Certainly there would have been some who would have believed because of this. They would have been convinced that Mary and Joseph were pure. But clearly there were others who would not believe this and did not believe this. Next to this verse, write CF 9, verse 34, and then flip back there and read that with me. They answered him, "You were born in utter sin, and you would teach us?" And they cast him out. In the court of public opinion, many believed that Jesus was born in sin. Mary indeed was no stranger to scorn. She had been looked down on and talked about for 33 years. And don't you wonder if all that time, enduring the disdain and contempt of others, did not sadly serve as preparation for this moment when she would see her son, whom she loved deeply, hanging on the cross, listening to the vile words that people said to and about him. It's one thing to endure scorn yourself, right? But when others are dishing that out to our kids, that's a whole nother level. That's when Mama Bear comes out, right? We want to fix things for our children. We want to protect them. But Mary knew those feelings couldn't be acted on, or God's redemptive plan could not come to pass. Mary's suffering at the cross is an image of profound heartbreak and endurance. As a mother, she had cherished Jesus from his birth. She had seen him grow and had witnessed his compassion and his miracles. She had heard him teach. But in these agonizing hours, Mary stands before the cross, watching her son, innocent, loving, and full of grace, endure an excruciating death. Every insult thrown at him, every wound inflicted, is a piercing blow to Mary's heart. The prophecy of Simeon, when Jesus was just a little baby, must have echoed in her mind. A sword will pierce through your soul also. Luke 2, verse 35. Here that prophecy is being fulfilled, and Mary knows that this is the time that he was born for. Her suffering is not just the pain of losing a child, it's the agony of seeing her beloved son rejected and despised by the very people that he came to save. Her sister is with her, along with Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and Mary Magdalene. You may want to write CF Mark 15, verse 40 here, which gives some more details about these women. Read verses 26 and 27 with me. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. Standing near Mary and the other women is John, the beloved disciple, the author of this book, whom Jesus entrusts with her care. Even in his final moments, Jesus shows his concern for her, ensuring that she will be looked after. Well, why would Jesus ask John to care for his mother? Well, it's a reasonable assumption to think that Joseph has died at this point in time. There has not been any mention of him in the Gospels for an extended period of time. And at this point in time, Jesus' brothers were not believers. You may want to write CF 7, verse 5, next to verse 27, where we're told that his brothers were not believers. Because of this, Jesus entrusted the care of his mother to the one who was like-minded, to the one who was loyal, faithful enough to stand by him when all else had deserted him. No wonder that John is described as the disciple whom Jesus loved. Wood said, "The brothers of Jesus, sons of Mary and Joseph, 4 in number, were unbelievers," John 7:5. Hence, Jesus preferred that his mother should be with the beloved disciple rather than with them. In verses 28 through 35, Jesus hangs on the cross, knowing that his mission is nearly complete. He said, "I thirst." This fulfills Scripture, and then the soldiers offer him sour wine on a sponge. After receiving it, Jesus declared, "It is finished," and bowing his head, he gives up his spirit, signifying the completion of his redemptive work. To ensure he has died, the soldiers pierce his side with a spear, from which blood and water flow. Read verse 35 with me. "He who saw it has borne witness. His testimony is true, and he knows that he is telling the truth, that you also may believe." I highlighted this in my Color for Faith and wrote CF chapter 20, verses 30 through 31, where we are told that these things were written so that we may believe. The eyewitness account emphasizes the truth of these events. It gives us a reason to be confident in the truth of these words. And when we take John's testimony and combine it with Matthew and Mark and Luke's, the harmony of the Gospels is undeniable, and it gives us an even greater reason to have faith in the words that are recorded for us. Read verses 38 through 40 with me. "After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him permission. So he came and took away his body. Nicodemus also, who earlier had come to Jesus by night, came bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds in weight." In verse 38, circle "but secretly for fear of the Jews." Now, we've talked about this before. Draw a line from the word secretly to your margin and write CF chapter 9, verse 22. And you'll remember there where we were told that the people were afraid of the Jews because they feared being cast out of the synagogue. Joseph was a follower of Jesus, but his faith had been hidden, tucked away in the shadows. But then the Lord's death emboldened him, and he sought the Lord's body for burial. And who is with him? but another who has emerged from the shadows of faith to boldly demonstrate whose side he was on, but Nicodemus. Next to his name, you may want to write CF chapter 3, verses 1 through 15, and chapter 7, verses 45 through 52. These men take the body of Jesus and prepare it for his burial with myrrh and aloes. They placed him in the garden in a new tomb, a tomb that belonged to Joseph. Listen to what Wood said. The exceptional amount of spices, 100 pounds, a pound being approximately 12 ounces according to our weights and measures, may be accounted for on the ground that the extraordinary devotion which Joseph and Nicodemus felt prompted them, being well-to-do, to go far beyond reasonable expectation in ministering to the Lord. In John chapter 19, we see significant contrasts in the response to Jesus during his crucifixion. Pilate, despite his authority, shows no backbone. He repeatedly declares Jesus' innocence, but he ultimately caves to pressure, prioritizing position over justice. In stark contrast, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, once secretive in their faith, emerge boldly, risking their lives and reputations to honor Jesus in his death. Their courage and devotion stands as a testament to the impact of the proof that they saw and how their faith developed based on evidence of what they had seen and what they had heard. They went from little faith that was hidden faith tucked into their hearts to great faith and were unashamed to show the world. And then we have the Jewish leaders, hardened by pride and envy. They push relentlessly with all of their might and leverage for Jesus' death, refusing to recognize the truth before them. But standing near the cross are the women and John, displaying a heart of unwavering devotion and love. They stay close, sharing in Jesus' suffering when others abandoned him. These contrasting responses reveal the different conditions of human hearts. Those ruled by fear, envy, hardness, or those ruled by courage and devotion. Reflecting on these differences challenges us to consider our own response to Jesus. Let's talk about some practical applications that we can make from this chapter. Number 1, we need to stand firm in our convictions. Pilate's failure to stand for the truth reminds us of the importance of having conviction, especially when we're faced with difficult decisions. Instead of being swayed by pressure or fear of losing status, we're called to stand firm in our convictions, even whenever it's costly. James 4:17. Number 2, we need to move boldly from private faith to public action. Joseph and Nicodemus remind us that a genuine growing faith doesn't stay hidden. They didn't start well. They began in fear, but they finished well with strong, bold action. This reminds us that while fear is a natural feeling and emotion, a growing faith should lead us to act with courage. There may come a time when we're called to step into the light, even at personal risk. True faith will often demand that we step out of the shadows and live boldly for Jesus. We're told to let our light shine, Matthew 5:16. Now, one way that you could do that is by sharing this video. I would love for you to join me in my effort to teach people about the Bible, and you can do that by simply sharing this video. Number 3, we've got to guard against a hardened heart. The religious leaders' rejection of Jesus shows us the danger of allowing pride or fear to blind us from the truth. Keeping a teachable and humble heart can help us to avoid spiritual blindness. We should pray for a humble, teachable heart and seek to know God's Word and the instructions therein. And number 4, we need to demonstrate unwavering devotion. The women and John show us the beauty of steadfast love and devotion, even in the darkest moments. Their presence at the cross is a powerful example of loyalty and faithfulness. We can apply this by staying committed to Jesus, especially when times are tough. Mary's silent suffering teaches us about the cost of love, the strength required to endure unimaginable pain, and the power of unwavering faith. Through her tears and heartbreak, she embodies a faithfulness that doesn't waver, even in the face of the greatest sorrow. The women that were with her, supporting Jesus and his purpose, were all pillars of strength for them. They were women who demonstrated the depth of their conviction. I want to be like these four women. And what of the loyalty and faithfulness that John displayed? The disciple whom Jesus loved. I want to live in such a way that Jesus could say that about me. That no matter what trials came her way, she was always at my side, even to the end. I want to be like John. I want to be a faithful friend to Jesus that he loves deeply. Don't you? What a chapter. Through these contrasts, we are challenged to reflect on our own faith. Are we willing to stand firm in our convictions, even when it's uncomfortable or difficult? Are we ready to bring our private beliefs into the light, letting our actions testify about our devotion? Is our faith resilient, courageous, and deeply committed? A faith that not only survives adversity, but shines through it? May we be inspired to live with the same steadfast devotion to Jesus, allowing his truth and love to transform us from the inside out. Thank you for studying with me today. Be sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share wellness and the Word with your friends. And if you have any thoughts you'd like to share from this chapter, or just simply want to introduce yourself, I would love for you to share those in the comments. I look forward to our next study on John chapter 20. Until next time, stay well, stay blessed.